Surge line promise. The night the Gulf came up the stairs. The substation breakers tripped like knuckles. My bucket truck rattled in a crosswind I could taste. And a voice on county ops, one I didn't know yet, said my name like a handrail. Miguel, do not reclose feeder 12. Bring them to the Dunbar High west doors. I'll have the AED and oxygen now. I'm Miguel Migs Álvarez, 27. Line worker for a utility you've cursed at, under your breath, and thanked out loud when the air finally kicked back on. My office is a 60-foot bucket with a coffee thermos, a torque wrench, and a stack of orange cones that make drivers behave. I grew up east of Fort Myers, learned the alphabet from hurricane names, and learned prayer from my abuela's hands and a generator we shared with 2 neighbors after Irma. People think line work is about height and danger. It is also about promises. This wire will carry what it should and nothing it shouldn't. This pole will not betray you when wind or water tries to coax it into a worse idea. On the day the Gulf forgot its manners, the forecast had said major hurricane. Storm surge 10-16 feet in places and life-threatening inundation. I heard the numbers and packed extra socks. At 16:20, the feeder map on my tablet blinked red across Cape Coral Parkway like a rash. By 17:05, Estero was a rumor. By 18:11, a breaker at Orange River Substation tripped as clean as a slap, and the radio on County Ops said, "We are transitioning to life safety. If your job is not breathing or keeping others breathing, you are staging, not operating." I was already in gear, the sky pissed sideways. The palms bent like men in an argument. The sound of surge like a drawer of knives. In North Fort Myers, a mum waved me down from a second-story window with a toddler under one arm, and that look which says the universe is badly scheduled. I pointed her toward the neighbor's John boat inching down the street like a scripture. I can't be a boat. I can be a promise. We'll get you power when breathing is boring again. She nodded like people do when they accept that faith and fact are different lanes in the same flood. At 18:32, dispatch asked for a confirm on feeder 12 reclose. My thumb hovered over authority I'd earned with years and 2 scars. The county patch cut in. The new voice carried calm like a license. Miguel Álvarez. This is André Baptiste, shelter lead at Dunbar High. We've got oxygen concentrators on house power and a transfer switch that's feeling shy. If you reclose feeder 12, you will energize water on Canal Street. Do not do that. Bring anyone you can west doors. We'll take elderly, pets, everything that breathes. He said my name like a handrail. Secure. Offered, not imposed. Copy, shelter, I said. Feeder 12 stays cold. I'll route who I can. How's your gen? He exhaled a laugh like the wrong kind of confession. Manual is fine. Automatic transfer died shy. We're running 1 diesel and a prayer. I have volunteers who can do anything if you show them which bolts to respect. I can show bolts, I said. 30 minutes of ugly road if roads are still ideas. But the truly shocking part hadn't happened yet. The bridge into Cape Coral disappeared, then reappeared under a curtain of spray. The world smelled like salt and hot transformer oil. I parked the bucket at the edge of what used to be a street and was now a canal, wearing stop signs like earrings. I watched a pontoon boat rescue a Labrador with better swimming form than its owner, who climbed aboard like a man promising to reconsider his priorities. I wanted to be the kind of help that gets applause. The night wanted me to be the kind that chooses not to kill with electrons. I kept feeder 12 cold. The west doors of Dunbar High had cones that glowed like tiny lighthouses. André was there in a yellow vest, badge on a lanyard that had seen seasons, poncho shot through with rain, and a voice the exact temperature of trust. He was early 30s, Haitian American, forearms like a man who believes in boxes, cots, and doing the thing, eyes that measured without diminishing. He looked at me like I was not a solution or a problem, but a noun he could use. Migs? André. We shook, then we worked. He pointed, I nodded. He delegated, I demonstrated. I walked a set of teenagers through fueling the diesel without baptizing themselves in it. I showed a retired electrician how to lock out the busted transfer because hope can be lethal when it looks like a switch. We ran orange cords like arteries along the walls. Oxygen concentrators got priority. CPAPs next. Phones never jumped the line no matter how persuasive their owners were. A woman in soaked scrubs came in with a cooler full of insulin, like it was the heart of the town. We found it a fridge on generator that hadn't yet invented drama. A kid brought in a cockatiel in a shoebox. André found a quiet corner and a volunteer who liked birds and rules in equal measure. I thought diesel and cords were the whole puzzle. But the storm writes second acts for your lungs. and the next call put us on the clock. Mednet patched into county ops. Ambulance delay, low visibility, multiple stalled units. Shelter leads. Prepare to receive BLS patients for holding until transport is possible. André's jaw set, not angry, exactly. Resolved. He turned to me without ceremony. Can your bucket carry weight if we keep it low and slow? Not people, I said. Liability says no. Physics says maybe, but we honor liability until breathing disagrees, he said. And in a different life, I'd argue. In this one, I nodded. Breathing wins. We pushed cots into formations like a patient chessboard. André's volunteers moved like heads of a single organism. Grandmothers with clipboards, teenagers with purpose. A pastor whose sermon tonight was emptying mop buckets. The generator thudded like a heartbeat. Every time it coughed, 20 people looked at it with a gaze that could scold machinery into better manners. Then the transfer switch hissed and spit white smoke. Not dramatic, but persuasive. I killed its breaker from a safe distance like I was breaking up a fight. Manual only, I said. Automatic is a liar. Automatic is a luxury, André said. Manual is a community. Put that on a t-shirt, I said. And he smiled like the light came from inside. A deputy sloshed through the doorway like the hurricane owed him money. We've got an elderly couple in a single wide on Willard, knee-deep inside. Chair-bound husband, oxygen almost out. Ambulances can't reach. He looked at my truck like it was a donkey he wanted to borrow. I looked at André. He didn't say anything out loud. His eyes did. I slapped the bucket's ground alarms off and turned the outriggers half out, low and stable, and rolled. Willard was a river named ironically. We couldn't get the truck all the way, but we got close, 4 houses away. After that, calf-deep water and debris doing petty crimes against my shins. The neighbor's John boat was there already, the neighbor not. I knocked on 2 doors and found the neighbor asthmatic. A bad joke the night was telling. We took the boat anyway. Inside the trailer, Mr. Reynolds sat in a recliner that had decided to be a raft. Mrs. Reynolds had that taut calm that breaks your ribs if you look at it too hard. Oxygen hissed like it was trying to apologize. We'll get you to the high school, I said. We've got power that can be trusted, and a man who knows what to do with air. Mrs. Reynolds patted her husband's hand like a metronome. Thank you. We put Mr. Reynolds in the boat, shoved like sinners hoping for absolution, and poled back through a living room that floated 30 years of family photos like lily pads. At the street, I realized the curb had more drop than dignity, and water fell into a storm drain with the energy of a rumor. The John boat kissed the asphalt and stuck awkward. Let me get my bucket down to you, I said. We can make a bridge. Liability sent me a postcard from a risk manager's desk. Breathing put a hand on my shoulder and said, now. I put the bucket down to bumper height. Not lifting a soul, not transporting, just making a platform. 2 neighbors we deputized as physics picked up Mr. Reynolds under André's voice on the radio, which I had clipped to my shirt the way I clip excuses. Bend your knees. Keep the chair low. Don't swing him like a grocery bag. Count 1, 2, lift. We slid him across bucket steel like a slow dance and onto my truck's step. The deputy moved him to his cruiser like a chariot meant for ordinary greatness. The drive back to the shelter felt like cheating a quiz we'd studied too hard for. André met us at the door. No cape, just competence. He had O2 ready, nasal cannula like jewelry, pulse ox like a bedtime story. He put the cannula on like a man who respects faces. You okay? He asked Mr. Reynolds first, then Mrs. Reynolds, then the deputy, and only then me. It wasn't an afterthought. It was a ritual. I keep being, I said, because that sentence makes your lungs listen. He nodded. Me too in the bend of his mouth. I thought the night would let us keep breathing. But the Gulf files, second drafts, and the gym had one more lesson for our hands. A volunteer came running with a look I've only seen in places where people refuse to panic because others need the oxygen. The cafeteria ceiling, a leak. The water's near the breaker for the kitchen circuits. We jogged the corridor like people who know when to be gentle and when to make the floor respect you. The cafeteria had turned into a drum. Water dripped at a rate that would make a poet revise a line. The breaker panel had that smug look metal gets when it knows it can't drown, but everything around it can. We're killing this leg, I said. Kitchen circuits go dark until the roof learns manners. Copy, André said. We'll shift food service cold. PB&J. Shelf stable, fruit cups. We have bananas that look offended, but edible. I threw the breaker and tagged it like a teacher who loves rules but loves kids more. The volunteers rerouted snack with the swiftness of ants that have seen a picnic. Power kept flowing to the med gear because we'd planned the chords like we meant it. In the gym, a grandmother with a rosary led 3 kids in a quiet game of I Spy that I will remember when the world lets me pretend I don't cry. County ops crackled again. Tidal push rising along Veronica S. Shoemaker. Reports of 2 vehicles with people on roofs. Fire is boxed in by flooded intersections. Any high-profile vehicles able to stage as lighting and windbreak, respond. All the eyes in the gym slid to my truck like we'd rehearsed. I asked André with the smallest nod. He nodded back like permission is a 2-way sacrament. We took 2 volunteers to run cone and flag, parked the bucket at the edge of water that insisted on being a road, threw every light I had, and made the night reveal itself. 2 SUV roofs sat like islands in a petty ocean. One had a teen boy and a little sister. The other, a man whose phone was now a flashlight, because that's what phones become in the hour of truth. The water ended a foot before the bucket could be useful in any direct way. I am not a boat. I am a promise with a reach. We threw a rope to the SUV with the kids. The boy tied embarrassingly well. Scouts. Probably. And the little girl did the thing brave kids do. She told her terror to wait its turn. A neighbor with the John boat appeared again like a cameo you hope is written into the spin-off. We used my bucket to create a windbreak, the John boat to make crossings, the rope to keep decisions from improvising. We pulled the last man into the bucket shadow and walked him out like a word you don't say at church. Back at the gym, the little sister saw the cockatiel and decided they were fated. The boy cried into the heel of his hand where only grown-ups could see. I asked him to help me coil the rope, because help is how we finish crying without making it a project. I thought the storm would get tired of itself, but the generator hiccuped, and the room taught us that hope is a thing with gallons. The diesel coughed in a way I didn't like and wavered 1 frequency tick. André looked at me with a blank face that meant he was deciding whether to lie to the room for their good. Fuel? I asked. He glanced at the board he'd drawn up on packing paper. Fuel, remaining in chicken scratch math. He kept it honest. We've got 4 hours at this load. 8 if we throttle and accept some duck. We throttled. Non-essential cots became stories in whispers by phone light and a solar lantern a volunteer produced like a rabbit. We moved oxygen users closer to generator to waste less cord. We taught a row of grandpas how to take turns like it was an Olympic sport. You okay? He asked me in a corner where the mop bucket had time to catch its breath. I keep being, I said. Me too. He put his gloved hand on my wrist for 1 beat. Not a claim, not a grab, a rest. PG-13 is enough when the room needs the oxygen more. A crackle from county ops. Major water main rupture near Palm Beach Boulevard. Pressure drop affecting Dunbar. Shelter leads. Expect low water. Conserve. Flag sanitation issues. Also, possible looting reported east. PD says unconfirmed. The room felt itself pull smaller and then push larger. We chose larger. We pulled out hand sanitizer like a sacrament. We asked kids who could read to post signs. Flush only when brown. They thought it was hilarious. Laughter is a kind of hygiene. The pastor did a floor meeting with a voice like an umbrella. André cut lighting to half in the aux hall, and the room accepted it because we told them the why. Somewhere around 3:10, the wind changed vowel. The lull that is not peace arrived. We walked the gym with clipboards like we were counting hours to sunrise in segments we could chew. Mr. Reynolds slept with his cannula soft and a magazine open to a page he hadn't meant to read. The cockatiel was a better sleeper than its owner. A volunteer, who'd been an HVAC tech in another life, approached, sliding her phone toward us with a tweet from a city account. Do not attempt to return home before daybreak. Surge receding, but debris and downed lines remain. I read it and felt both seen and summoned. When the light thinks it's morning, I need to be lines again, I said. I know, André said. I'll try to keep you alive long enough to be useful. And then the generator hiccuped again. Not fatal, persuasive. I ran my hand along the fuel hose like a superstition. We had 2 hours if the gods stayed in the room. I thought our last test would be gallons, but the door opened to a surprise that rewrote the night's math. The west doors swung and a city pickup backed in like someone had taught it empathy. A crew from Public Works rolled out 2 drums of diesel like saints on casters. The driver, a woman with forearms that could host a TED Talk, said, "Stole them from a closed site with apologies to tomorrow. Heard your gen was thirsty. We siphoned like thieves of necessity. When the generator note steadied, 4 people cried without making sound. André closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he went back to his list like he'd found an extra hour at the bottom of a pocket. "You okay?" He asked again later when calm had made a nest behind my ribs. "I keep being," I said. "Me too." We did one more circuit of the gym. I fixed a cord that had decided to impersonate a trip hazard. He praised a grandmother who had convinced 12 kids to play silent charades for 20 minutes. On the whiteboard we kept for morale we wrote, "Sunrise ETA, 2 hours. Pancakes ETA, please God." My phone vibrated with a text from dispatch. "Post-storm patrol resumes are 7:30. Crews meet at Winkler Yard. Be ready to isolate downed lines. Feeder 12 remains locked out until field confirm. Good work staying human." I read the last sentence twice like water. When light finally arrived, it looked like a lie at first. The hallway strip of pale. The gym discreetly offering to remember color. People stirred like animals invented from the words neighbor and patient. Someone started coffee on a camp stove under a vent, with the kind of obedience heaven rewards. André stood next to me at the west doors, and watched the cloud deck consider us. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. The inch between not touching and touching is a language if you practice. "We held the night," he said. "The night held us," I said. He smiled a little. Both can be true. He had dried salt at the corner of one eye that wasn't from the Gulf. A city photographer, tired, polite, asked if he could take a few shots for the recap. He kept his lens aimed at hands, cots, cords, labels, not faces, like a man who still thinks consent matters when storms blur edges. In the background, there was probably a frame where 2 men stand under a sign that reads, "West doors," and 4 heads are closed for 1 beat. If there is, I hope it's grainy and usable and anonymous in the way truth likes to be. 2 days later, the city of Fort Myers posted a storm recap, water lines on doorways, piles of palm fronds like green porcupines, a map of restoration zones, a photo of public works drums arriving to a high school gym. The last slide was a grainy CCTV still from the west doors. 2 small figures under a fluorescent strip, one in a yellow vest, one in a reflective jacket. 4 heads inclined in a way that translates across languages. The caption, unusually kind for an official account, read, "Small, honest, enough." André texted the link and then, after a pause that carried the weight of a decision, "Dinner. Always," I wrote. "Good," he replied. "Because I am, we ate conch. Fritters and rice and beans at a small place on Martin Luther King Boulevard that had power. Because the owner had bought a generator the year his first grandson was born and refused to apologize for hoarding foresight. He told me about sheltered doctrine, span of control, the way triage is not a verdict but a promise to return. I told him about recloses, feeder isolation, the time a raccoon reached up into a pad mount and made a theological argument for grounding. We didn't pick a schedule. We made a rule. When storm surge watches get names, we text here. When the first feeder trips, we text me too. He keeps a spare tourniquet in my glove box because he's like that. I keep a Sharpie in his vest because he pretends not to always have one. Sometimes the safest place isn't behind a flood wall or inside a codebook. Sometimes it's the inch between 2 foreheads, under a school's west doors, while the Gulf negotiates with the sky. Sometimes it's a voice on county ops that says your name like a handrail. "I'm here," I tell him when the weather suggests we reconsider optimism. "Me too," he says. And Southwest Florida, stubborn, generous, stitched together by extension cords and potluck and grace, lets us try again.